Good evening. I'm Chris Brown, the John and Adrienne Mars Director of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Welcome to tonight's GE Aviation Lecture, whether you are joining us here in person at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center or tuning in virtually from across the country. The GE Aviation Lecture Series is the museum's longest-running sponsored program. We've hosted more than 150 GE lectures since 1982, spotlighting everything from icons of aviation like Sikorsky, helicopters, and the Navy's Top Gun School, to modern-day advancements in aviation, such as sustainability efforts and the future of supersonic flight. Tonight's speaker, Chuck Aaron, is a pioneer of helicopter aerobatics. Now think of that, helicopter aerobatics. So I'd say he fits right in amongst our roster of barrier-breaking GE Aviation Lecture Series speakers. Thanks to GE Aviation, we are able to provide access to these programs free of charge, both in person and online, reaching more people than ever before. Representing GE Aviation in the audience tonight is Pete Gimbastiani, Vice President, Government Relations at GE Aviation. Thank you to Pete and the GE Aviation for your wonderful and continued support. With help from our partners like GE, we are ready to inspire new generations of visitors for decades to come. This is an exciting time to be at the National Air and Space Museum. We are getting ready to open 8 new galleries this fall, the first phase of our ongoing project to reimagine over 20 galleries and presentation spaces at the Museum on the Mall in DC. The reimagined National Air and Space Museum will tell the transformative stories of aviation and spaceflight in new ways to new audiences. I hope you'll come by to see what we've been up to when we reopen that location later this year. But let's move on to tonight's program. I'd now like to invite our aeronautics curator, Roger Connor, to introduce our guest speaker. Roger.
Thank you, Chris. It is my great pleasure and honor tonight to introduce Chuck Aaron, a man who can make helicopters do things that most people don't think they can do. Not only is he an extraordinary pilot, but outside of combat, there's not much he hasn't done with a helicopter that can't be done. Those of us who are passionate about aviation all have our origin story. For me, it was the 1983 film Blue Thunder. As a 12-year-old, I was hooked on helicopters the moment I saw it. Those who have seen it know that the penultimate moment for the hero pilot, played by Roy Scheider, is when he loops the helicopter to get a jump on the baddie, supposedly a near impossible maneuver. For the filming, this was done with models. In reality, next slide. In reality, pilots started looping helicopters only a few years after they went into production. Piasecki Company test pilot Jim Ryan gets credit for being the first. He did it accidentally in the late 1940s while testing what became the HUP, when he pulled up too steeply and then could only recover by pulling it over the back. Since then, small numbers of company and military test pilots have been bold and brave enough to loop and roll helicopters and test flying in demonstrations. Matter of fact, if you go down to the south end of our museum, there's a very ungainly Command 225 intermeshing helicopter. That one was actually looped in the late 1940s. Since then, these pilots have been, but these demonstrations by these small numbers of company and military test pilots were not really brought to the mainstream until 2006, when Chuck Aaron started demoing a BO-105 helicopter publicly for Red Bull. And this normalized helicopter aerobatics in civilian operations in a way that they had never been before. Chuck was certainly not the first to perform helicopter aerobatics, but he has gained international recognition for showing that with the right airframe and the right training, helicopters can give any fixed-wing aerobatic demo a run for its money and still be able to do those things that only a helicopter can do. To give you a little idea of what Chuck can do in a helicopter, let's show a behind-the-scenes look at his work in the 2015 James Bond movie Spectre.
Mexico City, just having fun here with our helicopter. This is awesome, man. This is one of the coolest things this is the coolest thing I've ever done.
I think it's something I've never seen before, which is a fight in an out-of-control helicopter over this square, which should be filled with people.
We are in the Zocalo Square, which is one of the biggest city squares in the world. We've got 40 stunt guys mixed them throughout the crowd just to sort of keep an eye out, because we have got a moving helicopter, it does land. We've got Chuck Aaron, who's a Red Bull pilot, one of the best aerobatic pilots in the world.
Red Bull gave me wings, and this is it right here, the first FAA certified aerobatic helicopter in the world.
The plan of this has been going on for quite a few months. First of all, we had to figure out what we could do with a helicopter. We designed it, we've obviously rehearsed it numerous times on the ground. We've done the rehearsals at airports at low level, and then we brought it here and you're seeing what we've been rehearsing.
Chuck Aaron does amazing things with a Red Bull helicopter. And in this case, of course, it's not a Red Bull, it's a Baddies helicopter, but he is used to flying stunts. It really shows, it's incredible.
Someone at Bond saw me on YouTube, and Sam, the director, called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a Bond movie. And of course, who couldn't say no to that? It's just the ultimate fun job to do something with Bond.
We're very high altitude here in Mexico City, so we are not able to control the helicopter to the degree we need to for certain stunts, because with the thinner the air, the more difficult it is for helicopters to perform the kind of stunts I'm asking them. So we have to take it away and shoot it in another city, and then put the two together.
We'll be doing some down in a city called Palenque, where I'll do the full Monty. I'll do real loops, barrel rolls, backflips, vertical climbs, vertical dives. Just some awesome stuff you don't ever see anywhere in a helicopter. Chuck?
All right. Well, that was interesting and fun.
That is some truly remarkable flying, but everyone has to start somewhere. How did you get into this?
My dad, my dad was a pilot when he was 16 years old, and he, that plane you see on the bottom there was a Curtiss Robin, I think they call it, and he started barnstorming himself in the late 30s, and then 1939 came along and Canada got into World War II. So he went from Texas, where he's barnstorming in this little biplane, and he went on to the RCAF in Canada. And they hired him on there as a flying sergeant. And a year later, they made him all officers instead of sergeants. And then December 7th, 41 happened, Pearl Harbor, and he went from, and then the United States got into World War II. So he came back to the U.S. and made him a captain in the Army Air Corps. And so the answer is my dad. So he stayed in, and he was in World War II and Korea and Vietnam.
And did he kind of help guide your entry into aviation?
Yeah, he got me started in flying and was teaching me how to in an airplane. And he just retired from or not quite, he hadn't retired yet from the Air Force, but near, I think it was 68 or so, I started flying with him. And then he got me a ride in a Bell 47 helicopter. And when that happened, that changed my whole view and perspective on aviation. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and I've been one ever since. So I owe it all to my dad. He got me here.
What was about the helicopter that drew you to it?
I think just the freedom of the movement, how you can fly it, and you can hover it, and you can pick it up and back up or go sideways and in any direction you wanted. So I just thought the feeling you got from that of being an aviator, and being able to do those maneuvers was as close to being a bird as you could be.
And how did you get your start as a career in aviation?
I was in the Army from 68 to 70, and I got out and used my VA benefits and got my helicopter license shortly after that, and I got a job crop dusting. So I started flying a little Hughes 300 and spraying cotton in South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of like we see.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same one.
Now,
Same one.
that's going to be a hard way to learn a living.
It was, yeah. I was getting paid $200 a week, and I flew from sunup to sundown 6 days a week. And it was, I flew 600 and something hours in like 4.5 months for the cotton season for spraying for a boll weevil that was eating the cotton. And that got me over 1,000 hours from that event. And then a friend of mine named Bob Showalter in Orlando had just bought an Instrom, an F-28A, and was looking for someone to fly it and teach in it. So I went down there and asked him, I said, and my mother saw it in a newspaper. She called me up and told me about it and said, and so I was just finishing up the cotton season at the time. And I drove down to Orlando, talked to Bob, and I said, let me have the job and I won't charge you anything. But for every student I bring in, you give me $25 per hour. And so you don't have to put out any initial money for me at all. Just pay me what I earn. And so that's how I got started with. And it actually got flying more and more things. And the company got bigger. And I finally formed my own company, helicopter company. And I got a bunch of other contracts with it.
We see the Instrom on the screen here. Where did you start flying next after that?
Hughes 500, and then Jet Ranger, Sikorsky H-19, H-34 Sikorsky. I got a contract with WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando, Florida, flying their news helicopter. And actually, before that, I was flying for WHOO. I got a contract with them, radio station, country and western radio station, doing traffic watch. Yeah, that's the H-19 I had for WHO. You can see it on there. I just used that temporarily until I got the Hughes 300 to fly for that. We did traffic reports in downtown Orlando with that. So that was my get the contract helicopter, and then I changed it over to the Hughes 300 shortly afterwards. The picture on the right there, the red and white H-19 on floats, I got a contract with Army Corps of Engineers in San Juan, Puerto Rico, working on Fort El Morro there, and we ferried that helicopter from Orlando down to Puerto Rico, and that's my dad ferrying it with me, and we stopped on this island to refuel ourselves, and that's what we're doing here. He's got a 55-gallon fuel tank there and a garden hose, and I sucked it out. That's how we transferred fuel. And we're on this island in the middle of nowhere. There's no one else on the island. But that was the only way we could get there with it.
Now, you've had some interesting connections with other parts of aviation, and you had an association with the Apache, is that right?
Yeah, right after this contract, I got another one with Martin Marietta, which is now Lockheed Martin, and they're also in Orlando. And with TADS PNVS, TADS PNVS is the system that's on the nose of the Apache helicopter, and it does the guidance systems for the Hellfire missiles, and there's the optical system in there so they can see day or night through it, and a targeting system in there so you can point your machine gun at this point or that point. Anyway, so I did all the initial flight test of that for Martin Marietta in that helicopter, in the H-19.
Wow, it's remarkable. Now, you also did something for NASA, is that right?
Yeah, I worked for NASA for about a year. I was trained, I was flying a UH-1B Huey, and they got this Huey out of the boneyard for NASA's use for air rescue for them, and they hired me to be the chief of air rescue for NASA for up to 6 astronauts from ground zero where they launched to 150 miles offshore. And so anyway, when they gave me this helicopter to use it. It wasn't quite effective enough, but at least it got the program started.
That was like way before the shuttle launched, or?
Yes, it was before the shuttle launched, and I got to go and meet all the astronauts and back then, and Crippen and Young, I think it was, that did the first space shuttle testing out there, and they would bring in their Gulfstream jet that was modified to look just like the inside of the space shuttle, and they'd do the testing out at Patrick Air Force Base with it. So I got to meet all the astronauts while I was there too.
You did some interesting air crane type operations, I guess, in the 80s and 90s, and got to rub elbows with some interesting celebrities. I think, Arnold Palmer and Jimmy Buffett. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I gave Arnold Palmer his very first helicopter ride, and he bought a helicopter right after that. And Jimmy Buffett was flying in as a passenger with I guess he's probably co-pilot. He'd hired a plane to pick him up and fly him down to Miami, and he ran it out of gas. He didn't. The guy that was rented the plane from misjudged the distance, and he ran out of gas about 5 miles short of Tamiami in the Everglades. And there's a picture of it right there. So he is a Navajo chieftain. So they hired me to come out there and pick it up and take the airplane from the Glades into the airport.
Well, now you've also been flying in some pretty exotic locations. I know you went to an expedition or a couple expeditions in Turkey to look for Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
And some pretty high, extreme high altitudes.
Yeah, that right there, that's Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey, right on the Russia-Iran border. And I landed a Hughes 500 E model up there on that, which is above its service ceiling. That was 15,200 feet. And we're out there on an expedition looking for Noah's Ark. We had a subsurface radar detector that we could drag across the snow. In the helicopter, we took it out. I flew it up there. We took all the equipment out. And then the Turkish pilot that was with me, he flew it off the mountain and then left us up there dragging this thing around in tents. We're up there about 3 days, and I was talking to the gendarme, which is the real top secret bad guys for the Turkish army that was actually supporting me and protecting me. Called me up on the radio and told me that there was 5 armed guys coming up from the north side of that mountain trying to capture me because they wanted to turn me into the Ayatollah Khomeini guy over there and as a POW to them. So the U.S. would buy me back, so to speak. Anyway, they told us about him, and we couldn't. The helicopter guy wouldn't come back up and get us, so we had to walk off the mountain. And that was arduous, but we made it.
Wow.
So I went over there looking 8 different times, just so you know out there, I'm a Christian, and I really believe in the Bible, and I think Noah's Ark is on that mountain, right in that spot in the snow, in a caldera, buried. I think it's there today.
Now you've got, after this, you wound up with a Cobra helicopter.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit how that has shaped your career since that time. And
yeah, that's a long story. I'll try and keep it short. And the short side of it is a guy had bought a Cobra that was wrecked from DRMO, which is Defense Reutilization Marketing Office. It's a military operation, and they sell junk they want to get rid of. And they had a Cobra like that one you see on the screen there, that was in Afghanistan, and it was parked, and a big Chinook hovered up next to it and blew it over. And so the Army scrapped it, and they sent it back to the U.S. and took all the parts off of it and sold the airframe, and I wound up buying it for junk prices. And I took 2.5 years, and I stripped it completely apart, and I got involved with the DRMO program so I could receive all the opening bids to buy used military stuff that was being sold. And it just happened to be the same time they were taking the Cobra and downsizing it so they could get the Comanche or the Apache, the H-64, to take its place. So the Army was getting rid of all this brand new spare parts they had at the same time. And I had this helicopter haul. And a friend of mine named Bob Van Kampen, who's a very wealthy guy, financed me to put this thing together. And it took me 2.5 years, and we put every rivet in it brand new, and all the skins were brand new, and we overhauled all the components, and so I had a brand new looking helicopter when I was done as a Cobra.
Did you want it for aerobatic use, or what was your
No,
thinking
it was
behind
just
getting it?
yeah. The thinking behind it was, I could get a Cobra helicopter. How cool is that, right? and my friend, who was Bob Van Kampen, was all for it. We just thought we'd rebuild it and sell it and make some money on it. And meantime, so we did all that, and I wound up doing some movies with it, movie work, and that's what got me into the movies business, was using that helicopter for various different shots and different movies. Then Red Bull came in. They found out I had this helicopter, and Dietrich Mateschitz owns the company, and he sent his guys out. He wanted it, and so he talked me into selling it to him, and that's how I got hooked up with Red Bull.
And so with the, when you got into Red Bull, you're most famous for using the BO-105, and which is essentially a Cold War German Army helicopter, West German Army. How did you get associated with that aircraft? Why did you choose that aircraft? What made that an interesting opportunity for you?
That's a good question. Dietrich Mateschitz, the guy that owns Red Bull, when I gave him delivery of my Cobra, knew I was a pretty talented guy, and I could, because in the other business I didn't tell you about, I used to buy helicopters and restore them and rebuild them and sell them. So I did that along with all the other stuff I was doing with all these other contracts. So he knew I had the ability to when he got my Cobra, that I could do whatever I wanted. And he asked me, "Can you do aerobatics in a helicopter?" And I said, "No, you can't do aerobatics in a helicopter. That's just out of the question." So that kind of that conversation quit, and he got in his Falcon 900 and flew back to Europe. And meanwhile, this is going around in my head. Here's this billionaire that's wanting to know if I can do something. There's got to be something I can do, a way to figure this out. And I'd seen on videos of the BO-105 doing low-level aerobatics in Germany, and I went, "Oh, this is a possibility." And I found out that ERA Helicopters, who does offshore oil work, had a bunch of them that they were using in offshore oil business, and I went down to them and I bought 2 from them. Well, first of all, let me back up. So I called Dietrich after I figured out that the BO-105 would probably be the best suitable for this, and in a short conversation, to keep this short, he said, "Do it, I'll pay for it." So I wound up going over and I bought 2, took them back to my shop, tore one completely down, took it all apart, took out everything in it that I didn't need, and told the FAA what I was going to do, and they thought I was crazy that I was going to try and do this. And so it took about 1.5 years of research using other experimental test pilots, Rich Lee, Kevin Bredenbeck. Kevin's from Sikorsky. He flew the X2 that you have here on display here. Rich Lee was a test pilot for Boeing, flying the H-64. Great guy, both of them are. Tom Morgenfeld was helping me. He's another experimental test pilot. So I reached out to all these test pilots that I knew to help me with this. And through the years, we wound up putting it together, and I got the very first certified aerobatic helicopter in the world was the BO-105, and it was in 154 Echo Hotel. And then after the thing got certified, I was not mentally paying attention, so to speak, that this thing's actually going to get finished. And it did, and the FAA gave me the certificate that, okay, you can fly this thing aerobatic now. That's when it hit me personally like a bomb. I wasn't expecting the shock it gave me. It's like, it was now it's time to do what you said you're going to be doing. You spent $2 million in somebody else's money trying to get there. So they gave me the certificate, and the next thing, like I said, was me to go out and practice and do it. And I went out in the mountains there in Ventura, California, and started practicing, trying to do a loop. And I must have tried 50 times. I'd go up and I'd pull up to do a loop, and I knew I could do it, but I just didn't know how to do it. And I'd go up and I'd chicken out and I'd roll out and fly away. And one day it was just, I remember it was in November, it was a cool, perfect, clear day, no wind. And I pulled it up to my chicken point, and I said, I'm going for it today. And I pulled it back, and I came out of the loop, and it was so easy for me. I did 10 more in a row right after that, because I didn't want to forget how I just did it, so I just kept doing it. So I did 10 in a row. So that was my personal Chuck Yeager moment, you know, in the helicopter, to give me the confidence to I can do just about anything with it.
So of all the things to get that aircraft up and running in that way, was it harder to figure out the engineering of it, or was it harder to work through the FAA and get them on board?
You know, I had a good FAA guy, and he was a positive guy, and it's really hard to find a good positive FAA guy that won't, you know, they're, as all you listening to me know, the FAA usually doesn't want to help you. But I found a guy named Carl Gerger in the FAA, and he did some stuff for Burt Rutan in the Mojave Desert and approved some of their stuff. And he actually was in the MIDO office in Van Nuys, California. And he was a real pro at it. He just said, keep at it. And so the FAA wasn't a problem, and the money wasn't a problem. It was just a time thing of working everything out, and I finally got certified to do it.
How hard was it to modify the airframe?
You know, it was one step at a time. Thanks for reminding me. So I had all these other test pilot people that were friends of mine. So I'd call them up and ask them all kinds of questions, what it's going to be like, and they gave me their best answers. So I reached out to as many people as I could. It wasn't a solo thing. It was using all the people I could find that were smart in this field to help me get there. I'm the lucky guy. All these other test pilots, they're usually in some back corner being supported and paid for by Boeing or Sikorsky or McDonnell Douglas, and no one knows anything of what these guys are actually doing, because they're really doing the tough work. I got highlighted because it was Red Bull's trying to promote it. And so I started doing air shows with it, and it got real popular. So I owe a lot of my experience to previous test pilots.
What's the top thing that you've learned from them?
Patience, talking to other people, that's real important. Don't do anything stupid on your own. Take your time. Be methodical about it. I call on one of my coins, I got one that says methodical risk taker. I don't mind taking the risk, but as long as you put some thought behind it and get help with it, then you know, we went to the moon, right? How did we get there? Methodically, we got there. So I'm real pro for people to come up with new ideas and new ways to do things in the aviation world, but I just think you should do it methodically.
And with your reputation for being an extremely safe pilot and kind of setting the standard for that, what is your kind of number one advice for aviation safety?
That's another good question. My rule was, if I got scared myself, I wouldn't do it. So I would go out and play with it, you know, and get to my edges of my limits, but I wouldn't exceed what my personal limits were. And again, talking to other mentors helped me, and no one from like Jim Van Horn. Van Horn is he makes tail rotor blades and main rotor blades for helicopters, and he's a very smart guy, and he's the one that talked to FAA and put in a 12-page letter that this helicopter can do aerobatics if modified a little bit, and I forgot where we're going with that one. But anyway, the helicopter does very good aerobatics, and from the design of it, basically.
So we've got a few clips here, and maybe you just kind of talk us through what we're seeing.
Okay.
If you could just kind of run through those in sequence.
All right. Oh, so I decided one day I wanted to see what a rotor blade looked like in flight. So I made this, dreamed up this steel cage, and I had this guy weld it up for me, and we weighed it perfectly and mounted it right on top of the rotor head of the helicopter and put a GoPro camera on it and looked right straight down a blade. And this particular shot here, you can see where I'm flying, and right here I'm upside down. You can see the tail of the helicopter pass through right there. And the rotor blade, what it's doing at every RPM, and you can see it flexing there. I don't know if you can back this up or not, but if you could back, if not, it shows it. There you go, back it up. And you can see there's little balls that shake out there, and they are vibration absorbers, and you can see they're not moving when I'm upside down, so the blade is not shaking at all, and it actually likes being upside down in this particular shot here, because there's no load limits on the vertical part of the blade. So this is just this just shows how the blade effectively works when you're flying.
Is there something dramatically different about this type of maneuver compared with, say, a fixed wing?
Yeah, they're completely different. The airplane and the helicopter aerobatics are totally different. I actually went out, before I started doing aerobatics in this thing, went out in a Citabria, an aerobatic Citabria guy gave me a couple hours dueling it, thinking that would help me. And then when I got into this thing, it was absolutely useless. Because you're flying a rotor disc here that's above the aircraft, and you're flying the disc. You're not flying where your seat is. You have to pay attention to what you're doing here as you're throwing a fuselage around this flying disc. And so your thought patterns are completely different from an airplane. You're not rolling in with wings around you. You've got a disc that's over your head. And you can't do anything negative. Now, I actually got this certified to 1 negative G without, and up to positive 3.5 Gs without hurting it. But the aircraft was designed very well for it. And you can see here where I'm rolling here, and I've got a cup of water if you, in the center of the console right there. And Bob Hoover inspired me to do this maneuver. I wanted to see how it worked out for me, so I put the little cup of water right there and did loops and rolls with it. As you can see in this video right here, the water stays in the cup. And I'll take it here in a second, any second here, and I'll pick that thing up and I'll drink it and show you that it's still in there. This is, by the way, this is us. Here we go right there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. You can thank Bob Hoover for that too. Yeah.
Now, the 105's got a bit of magic in it, right? I mean, this is a really remarkable helicopter. Can you tell us about kind of just the technology here, and what can you do with this aircraft that you couldn't do with some others? Is there what makes this one special? The
rigid rotor head in the center of the picture there's that shiny metal part there. It's titanium, and it's milled out of a single piece of titanium. And these blades that are attached to it are made out of fiberglass. So the marriage between the fiberglass blades and that rigid titanium head is perfect, because the fiberglass on the rotor blade can lead and lag and flap and feather and not get hurt. And that rotor head being rigid like that only lets the blade, it has bearings in it to let it flap only and feather only. So the blades go around in a circle. They don't have a lead and lag hinge or a flapping hinge. And if you remember I think it was an H-56 Cheyenne that we built in Van Nuys, and it had a same setup, but it had metal blades, and they broke off. They crashed 2 of them, and both of them, they slung the rotor blade. The rotor blade broke off because it was metal. But it won't happen in this machine because it's because of the fiberglass blade.
Now, if you try to do this in say a Huey like we've got out here, what would be the problem there?
That's an underslung system. It's a whole different design of the rotor head. It's kind of like the Robinson. The rotor head tilts over a mast pole, and so it's real sloppy, and it's really easy to cut off a tail boom on it, and the blades will flex up and down. And this one has this rigid rotor head runs at 430 RPM, and with that speed and centrifugal force, they won't flap up and down more than a couple inches maximum, and a negative G to a positive 3.5. So that's why this system is great for doing aerobatics, and the rest are not. So you just can't do it. Now the Apache, for example, Rich Lee flew the Apache, and he's looped and rolled it a bunch of times. It has a fully articulate rotor head, but they too have composite fiberglass type blades and a fully articulate rotor system that's a little bit different from this, but because of the rigidity and the RPM, they can do the same thing. They won't get too much on the blade flap. So that's the biggest challenge in doing aerobatics in helicopters is you don't get blade flap to where it'll come and chop your tail off in flight. It only happened once.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career as an air show demo pilot?
Boy, I did it for Red Bull for air show circuit for 10 years, and I was probably doing between 25 and 30 air shows in a year, and I'd probably done 275, I think, air shows now. And it's a grueling job. It's you have to get it between the different air shows, and the fun part is when you actually do the air show. The 5-minute demonstration when you're out there looping and rolling it is the funnest part. But there's a lot of work to get it to that point. A lot of people behind the scenes that are working to keep the aircraft running and working but the aerobatic air show thing is a lot of fun.
Do you have any kind of wild "there I was" stories about performing? I know you had one time you started to turn your governor off on yourself.
Yeah, right in the beginning, I was at my second air show I ever did. It was in San Francisco Bay, and I came in over the crowds. There was I think a couple million people on the ground watching this, and the Navy was there with the Blue Angels. And so it was a pretty big crowd watching this air show. And I came in to do an aerobatic air show. And the first thing I do in my show is I come in and I do a roll. And out of the roll, I do a vertical climb and then do a loop. Well, during this first event, and I know all these people are watching me, you can never, by the way, pay attention to the crowds when you're doing an air show. You have to forget the crowds, don't even think about the crowds, and just pay attention to what you're doing. And this, of course, I'm learning this as I'm going. And this particular air show in San Francisco, I was pulling it back up, and I didn't realize it, but I was holding the collective a little different than most people do, and I was holding the head, and I was nervous, and I was squeezing this little Chinese cap that adjusts the rotor, the engine speeds on a governor. And I'd actually rolled when I squeezed it down, I rolled one of the engines to idle it. I didn't know it. And I'm about straight up and down and getting ready to do a loop. And I'm realizing that I've got all the dashes lighting up with lights flashing and alarms going off in my ears saying, engine out, engine out. That got my attention really quick. But I continued the loop and made it through it on one engine. And as I was pulling up to do a roll, I realized what I'd done. And I was able to beep it back up and get it trimmed up with the other engine and recover from it. But that scared me to death that time.
Wow.
And I've had plenty of those.
So now, how did you wind up in a James Bond movie?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been on YouTube, I guess, a bunch, and somebody had saw it that worked at Bond and told the director, Sam Menendez, about, why don't you do the opening scene on a Bond flick using an aerobatic helicopter, and showed him a clip of me doing stuff. And so they called me up and asked me if I'd do it, and I said, absolutely, yes. So it was all from YouTube, actually, and them seeing me doing air shows.
Is film flying different than air show flying?
Yeah, the film flying, you have to do the same maneuver, same thing, and they'll film it 20 times before they say, okay, that's a good clip, go to the next one. In the air show business, you just go out and do your thing and it's over with. But in the movie business, you got to do it over and over and over and over and over, and they'll take the best out of all the different shots they got.
Now, you've kind of moved on from the air show business. What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm semi-retired now, but I work at, I've got a contract now. I sold my last aerobatic helicopter, N160 Tango Hotel, to Southern Utah University, and they use it for training, double IMC training for inadvertent meteorological conditions, training to teach pilots how to fly if you accidentally fly into the fog. And anyway, they bought the helicopter from me so they could teach that school, which is a very important school. I strongly recommend every helicopter pilot go through this double IMC training course. Anyway, I sold it to them, and they've hired me back to just talk for them at different events and then do some air shows. I'm still doing some air shows for them. But I'm trying to slow things down now in my life.
With the IMC training, I think the people think about the Kobe Bryant crash, and I mean, what's kind of your sense of what needs to happen to prevent that kind of accident?
Well, to prevent, we need more training, and that's what SUU is doing now. Is they're training in this helicopter, this aerobatic helicopter, how to recover from inadvertently flying into the fog. Because it scares you so much. I've done it and recovered and survived something like that once already in my life, and it just petrifies you when you're flying around at 300 or 400 feet and you fly into the fog by accident, like Kobe Bryant's guy did. And now you're, in the clouds, and you don't know what's up and what's down, and your instruments are all messed up, and you've got to recover it and to survive it, and so you're trying to recover a helicopter when you're in panic mode. It's really tough. So that's why the school is so important, to teach people how to do it in case it does happen. They've got something to remember how they were taught how to do it. But anyway, they're doing that now, and I'm slowing down. I moved down to, I want to say hello to my friends out there in Spruce Creek at the fly-in, and I moved down there to that area to semi-retire.
Great.
But I'm still flying, but just not as much.
Well, thank you, Chuck. We're going to open up for questions now. I believe we've got a mic here in the audience, and we do have questions coming in from the chat. So if anybody's watching online, please put your questions in the chat. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yeah, if you could make your way over to the mic.
Have you looked at any other type of helicopter other than the BO-105?
No, I haven't. I know the Hughes 500 will do it, but it's not certified to do it.
We've got a question here from the online audience. It says, you mentioned that aerobatics in a fixed wing is completely different than a rotary wing. Are there any aerobatics in a fixed wing aircraft that a rotary wing can't do? I presume you're not doing a lump shavak or certain things, right? So I mean, what's your kind of routine? So you do loops and rolls.
Loops and rolls and split S's. We do a backflip. An airplane can't do a backflip.
So what's a backflip compared to a
where you
loop?
hover and you're not moving. So a plane can't do that. But I do that in my routine. I'll go up vertically to a vertical climb until I run out of airspeed, push it over to level, and I'll actually do a pedal turn and spin around so the crowd knows I'm not moving anywhere, and I'll backflip from there. I'll just take it over and go all the way over backwards. So that's a maneuver airplanes can't do. We can do short tail slides. They can do longer ones, but an airplane can. But the tail slide is limited because it wants to flip back over to go nose down. And you don't want to hurt the tail boom because the attach points for the tail boom are structural, and you don't want to overstress the tail boom on it. But it'll do almost anything an airplane will do, and some airplanes can't do.
Okay. Question over here.
Oh, Carolyn, hi.
I flew with you once upon a time.
Yes,
Gosh,
I remember.
and I was just wondering, well, that was the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
but I was wondering if you've heard any rumors that Red Bull will be getting back into aviation.
You know, I've heard it both ways. I don't believe they're going to be doing the Red Bull air races any longer. But I heard someone else is going to start funding that and do their own type of a air show similar to it. But I don't think it's Red Bull.
So we've got one question here from online that asks, how do you have to modify your air show routine for weather conditions? So if it's turbulent or it's windy, does that change things for you?
Oh yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, because we're at an air show, you always fly up and down a runway. And so if you got a side wind to you, then when you're doing a loop, it'll skew you and you'll come out, further away from the crowd. And so you have to make up that each time you do a loop or a roll. But the winds affect the location of the helicopter on the ground, above the ground on all your maneuvers, and you're always making up for the wind push.
Okay, question here.
Pardon me? I've done that. Yeah, I used to have a school. I started the very first helicopter aerobatics school ever in North Carolina that was certified by the FAA to teach. And I used to do that, but when I sold it to Southern Utah University, they don't teach that course anymore. So currently it's not available.
Somebody wants to know, how do you determine the helicopter's aerobatic limits? Presumably the operating handbook doesn't have this.
Yeah, it doesn't have it in there. Well, it's in when I got it certified, the limits are G's, how many G's you can pull, positive and negative. And V&E max speed is already in the aircraft, is 145 knots. So as long as you don't exceed the speed of 145 knots and you don't pull more than 3.5 positive or 1 negative G, then you're okay. And I have a G meter that's in the aircraft, and it's got a marking device in it, so you can see how many G's I have pulled.
This might be a dangerous question, but somebody asks, what is your impression of the prototype drone air taxis with multiple rotors?
Well, I'm a fan of this new technology, this electric stuff, but I'm also a skeptic because there's multiple magnitudes of problems. That if you lose one rotor, how are you going to fly on? If there's 3 more, it's going to be really offset the thrust. And what happens when you run out of battery and you're in the helicopter or in this drone? It's going to fall. And how do they do auto rotations? I don't think they do them at all. So I think that's an issue that still has to be dealt with drones, and especially people in it. And a helicopter, we can do an auto rotation if it fails, but a drone can't do that yet, and it's only battery powered. So we're limited in aviation, or the drones are limited right now in battery technology.
Do we have any more questions from the audience here? Yes.
What do you think the best trainer helicopter is for new helicopter students?
And I'm going to repeat the question just so we can make sure it's heard. What do you think is the best trainer helicopter for new students?
I like. There's 2 of them. And there's either the Schweitzer or the Robinson, and I like them both. They both are very good, and they both do the job well. So there's only 2 to choose from, and that's it. And they're both good helicopters.
One of our online audience members asks, what is your favorite place to fly?
What or where?
Where?
I think the funnest place I've been is in the Southwest, and there's a bunch of valleys and beautiful areas out there, and there's nothing around except mountains and valleys, and you can dive down in there and fly around. I guess that's me. But I've flown in all kinds of environments all over the world. but I think the funnest is the Southwest for helicopter.
And similar question, what's your favorite helicopter?
Well, I've had that happen a bunch. Yeah, I love the Cobra. Thank you for saying that. I got about 300 hours in a Cobra, and they're super fun. The funnest for the pilot, if you're just talking the pilot having fun, it's the BO-105. It's just built like a tank and can do anything. But they all have their own jobs. You know, I love Jet Rangers. I mean, I think a 206 is really fun. It's a Cadillac, and it's like, you know, flying in luxury. They're air conditioned and they're roomy, and the Bell 407s. I love the 407. Does a great auto rotation. I'm pro-American helicopters personally, but the Europeans and Airbus got some beautiful aircraft. I can't badmouth them, but I do like our Bells and Sikorskis.
I know that a lot of fixed wing pilots don't get helicopters, and there is an art and an experience that is unique to helicopters. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I was just at a meeting the other day, and EAA meeting, and they were talking at the meeting about getting a simulator for the airport, and they want a simulator there so people can come in and do practice instrument approaches, and use the sim to do it. But it never mentioned a helicopter, and I said, why don't you have the same sim and set it up with a helicopter? And the guy that was running this thing chuckled. He said, why would we do that for a helicopter? And so yeah, we have our internal fights of airplanes and helicopter guys. The airplane guys are all airplane. They don't understand rotorcraft, and the rotorcraft guys usually are in tune both ways. But the airplane guys they don't get what a helicopter can do, is really probably the reason. If they knew how agile the helicopter was, just about every airplane guy that I've ever taught to be a helicopter pilot, they've dropped the airplane side of it and wanted to stay with the helicopters. So that's probably the best answer. That tells the whole story.
If you like stick and rudder, you can't beat it.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Somebody wants to know what's the difference between the standard 105 and your 105?
Well, that's the classroom secret. I can't tell you the mojo behind that, but basically, I can tell you the basic. Yeah, I know. But basically, I just shifted the weight of the aircraft, moved the CG forward, so that if you think about it, if you took a helicopter and you sunk it in the water, the first thing the helicopter would do is roll upside down, right? Because all the weight's on top. The rotor head's on top, the blades are on top, the main transmission's up there, the engine's up there, the tail rotor drive shafting system, the whole tail rotor is all on top of the fuselage. So if you sink it, it'll turn over. So I'm telling you that so you understand the theory of it in the air. So on my modifications, I took that into account, that if it gets upside down, if I was to stall it upside down, it would fall upside down, and you wouldn't be able to get out of it. That's why I shifted the weight forward to make it so it would eventually pull down, nose down, and you could fly it out of that. So that was the most critical thing I wanted to overcome getting the aircraft certified, was making sure it was safe to do it.
Now, we've got time for 2 more questions. Anybody in the audience in the back?
Yeah, sure. I'm an airplane guy, so I don't understand auto rotation. Have you ever experienced that? And
Oh, yeah.
So what is it like? Do you slam into the ground? How does that work?
So the question is, what's an auto rotation?
Yeah, this could take hours. So, an auto rotation is when the engine quits and the rotor system is still up there spinning, and it's your wings. And if you control it right, it'll continue to spin, and you can fly. And so but you're coming down at a 45-degree angle, and it's a pretty steep approach. And so as long as you keep the rotor RPM up, which you can do, as it gets closer to the ground, you just flare it, slow it down to 5-10 miles an hour, and then you push the nose forward, and then as it falls to the ground, you pull up on the collective, and you can land it smoothly. Yes, I've had that happen to me 7 times in the 50 years I've been flying helicopters. and I didn't break any of them. The auto rotation worked perfect, and I was able to put it down safely. So auto rotation is a great tool that a helicopter has.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And our last question from online, what advice do you have to young pilots interested in learning to fly helicopters?
Oh, to me, it was a life-changing event for me. I think the aviation business is, it's a great question, glad you asked that. We need helicopter pilots. We need mechanics. We need avionics technicians. And it's a great business to be in. I mean, just to be an aviator, fixed wing, rotor wing, whatever it is, and if it inspires you, that's what you ought to be doing. Follow your passions in life and go after your passions. And it'll never be work. It'll be a job. I mean, it won't say that, but it'll never be work. It'll be a fun job. And you want to go to work every day. So I love aviation. I can't say enough about it, good about it. I think it's a great field to be in business in the world, and it's something you can enjoy and be respected for. But I really, it's been a fun 50 years for me.
Thank you, Chuck. We really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. Look at this. Yeah. So there's an artist here. I think they're here. It's Mimi Stewart and her husband Charlie, and she painted this up for me anyway, I think she did a beautiful job. I want to make sure everyone sees these pictures about me flying the Red Bull helicopter. And thank you, Mimi, for doing this. Yeah.
Thank you to our in-person audience, and thank you to our online audience, and thank you very much to our program sponsor, GE Aviation.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.